Well, what is the tithe in the Old Testament? You'll actually see that it has to do with the produce of the land or the livestock and what you would bring to God in order to keep the priesthood in the temple going. It wasn't money. You had your separate monetary currency. You had silver, you had gold. So you can't say, well, that was their form of currency in the day. That was valuable, just like it is valuable to us now. But that wasn't their only form of currency. That was to fund the temple and to fund the priesthood. You would bring the animals, they would get portions of that. You would bring, some of your produce, they would, be sustained by that. That's the way God decided to set up the theocracy of Israel. Was that, hey, this tribe is going to tend to the temple, and me, on behalf of you guys gather around these Levitical priests and sustain them through, a 10% of what you bring in, right? So come and bring that. Somehow, we've decided in New Testament context, hey, you know what? It makes sense. We're the church. The building is like the temple. The pastor and the elders are like the priesthood. So the people should bring 10%. It's like, well, that is not at all the original intent of it. I don't even think that's an appropriate application. Now, you can say people should come and give to God however they deem fit, whatever they believe He's calling them to. You don't even have to give it to a church. Give it to a homeless person or a homeless shelter or an organization that's doing the work of God, or give it to a struggling family member. The point is, be generous. Paul says to give generously, not reluctantly or begrudgingly. Give with a generous heart. That's the only stipulation for giving in the New Testament, is that do it generously out of thankfulness to God and for His glory. It has nothing to do with 10%. It doesn't have to do with the original tithe. It doesn't have to do with money. So I don't believe that's an appropriate application. I don't believe that we can take the Old Testament Levitical temple tithe and go, therefore the church. It wasn't even about money. It was about livestock. It was about produce. It was about you sharing and coming around the Levitical priests. We're not a theocracy. We're a kingdom in terms of not an actual physical location on the earth where God's reigning in the midst of a nation. We are spiritually the nation, the people of God now. And what He expects of His people is that when He calls them to give generously to whatever person, organization, people, that they'll give because they're so thankful for what God has done. So I don't believe that there should be a requirement in church to give 10%. Guess what? There's no stipulation in the New Testament for it being 10% either. So, you can take I'll tell you what, since the temple was destroyed in AD 70, you don't have the biblical conditions to continue that kind of tithe. You can't. There's no Levitical priesthood. There's no temple. There's no sacrifices. Israel is not in the condition it was. You can't back that with Scripture anymore. What you can say is, not even say 10% is the bare minimum. Why? Why is that the bare minimum? Just because they did that? This is the difference between something that's prescribed in Scripture and something that's actually described. When you take something that's described and make it a prescription for people, you're misinterpreting the Scriptures. There's wisdom to glean, but I don't believe we take that and go, you know what? You need to give 10%. God will fund what He wants, how He wants, and He'll call people to do it. It's our job to be ready and generous, and even having made preparation to do that. So, that's why, Lord willing, if I plant a church soon, that it will be, hey, whatever you want to give to this place, to keep the lights on, to keep people leading and serving, and to make all the ministry we do possible, give as you see fit. No one's making you give. I'm not going to command you to give. Why? It's not my place to do that. You crazy? So, there's no command necessarily. You can draw the principles out that don't muzzle an ox, right? A laborer is worthy of his wages. Paul chose not to exercise that right, so I think at times other people will also choose to follow Paul in that regard, maybe a church community. So again, I don't believe there's a set of conditions or a command in Scripture to, hey, tithe like this at your church. Be generous. Be generous. It's actually not that hard. If you're just ready to be generous, make preparations for generosity. If you're not, then when God calls you to do it, you're going to be reluctant and you're going to hold on to your money and go, church doesn't need it. Well, you got to keep the lights on, right? But they're not going to make you. God's just going to lead you to do that as he sees fit. And it's not even going to be 10%. It might be 100. If someone wants to give like 10%, though, I'm never going to shame and go, really? Only 10%? This just the point is, when you only do something because you believe it's the bare minimum, and you're like, well, I only want to do the bare minimum. Maybe you have yet to see the grace of God. He didn't do the bare minimum. He did the absolute maximum. And I think loving God and loving people is going to oftentimes imitate that kind of sacrificial, over-the-top generosity and love. So I'll tell you what, there's a principle that I have gleaned from Scripture. I won't make this necessarily a command for all of God's people, but it's something I've applied to my life. The first portion, and it's different every month, the first portion of what is brought in at the beginning of the month, I give straight to fill in the blank. A ministry or an organization, people that have needs, I give that. Or at least I set it aside so I can give when the need arises. Haley's question, I'll answer this now. So, I only say that because some people might want some kind of practical example for, well, what do I do when it comes to giving, and how do I'll just say it like this. Give as the Lord leads, but make preparation. Make preparation for that. And watch God, bless the rest that you do get to keep. Because I do believe there's a principle, at least when I look at the Old Testament, a principle which is, it's ideal to give from your best. God commands the Jewish nation to do that, but he's already given his best, being his son, to us. So in response, I think it's only appropriate, not a command necessarily in the New Testament, but it's appropriate to give the first and the best of my resources and finances. And again, I will not place that on people. I'm just telling you what I do. Hey, thanks for watching this video. If you haven't already subscribed, go ahead and do that and hit the bell so you can be notified of any future videos that come out. And check out AboveReproachMinistry.com. We have completely free Bible study courses, a 40-day program, a 27-day, and 11-day program, all kinds of free resources. You can get a copy of my book. You can join our online church. You can get some merch. We have a bunch of stuff at AboveReproachMinistry.com. And it's also linked in the description below. Go check that out. And thanks for watching.